Sergeant Jessica, Jinx. Monroe adjusted the scope of her sniper rifle, her eyes narrowing as she calibrated for the station's artificial gravity. The sprawling Galactic conference chamber hummed around her, filled with soldiers and officers from over a dozen species. The room was a glittering assembly of advanced armor, exotic weapons, and arrogant smirks. And most of those smirks were directed at her. Jessica maintained a stoic expression as she ran a cloth over her rifle, her movements methodical. A small group of Zarthan soldiers clustered nearby, their luminous blue eyes fixed on her. Their armor shimmered with advanced holographic displays that outclassed anything Earth had developed. One of them, a towering figure with angular features and a sneer permanently etched into his face, stepped forward. "Hey, human," he said, voice dripping with condescension. "Did you bring that relic to show us how your ancestors fought? Or are you planning to demonstrate how to hit the broadside of a barn?" The Zarthan soldiers snickered, their laughter sharp and grating. Jessica didn't look up. She continued cleaning her rifle, eyes fixed on the metal as if it held all the answers she needed. "That's Sergeant Monroe," said a voice from her left. Corporal Vega, a lean, sharp-eyed Marine, stepped forward. His jaw was set, eyes cold. "Show some respect." The Zarthan leader, Captain Varnak, raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening. "Respect? For what? A primitive human holding a toy gun? Your kind still uses gunpowder and iron sights. Meanwhile, our marksman can hit a flea from orbit with a plasma pulse. Isn't that right, boys?" More laughter. Jessica's jaw clenched, but her expression remained blank. Vega's fists curled, but Jessica placed a steadying hand on his forearm. "Let it go," she said, voice calm, eyes still on her rifle. "It's not worth it." "Oh, I think it is," Varnak said, stepping closer. His imposing frame cast a shadow over her, the ambient light catching on his high-tech armor. "Tell me, Sergeant, do you even know what a plasmascope is? Or are you still squinting through iron sights like your primitive ancestors?" Jessica finally looked up, meeting Varnak's gaze. His eyes were a disconcerting shade of blue, cold and calculating. For a moment, the air between them was heavy and silent. The other soldiers leaned in, sensing a confrontation. Varnak smiled, showing too many teeth. "Tell you what, Sergeant. Let's make things interesting. How about a little contest? My top marksman against you. Show us what that antique can do. Or are you afraid your toy gun can't handle the pressure?" Jessica's gaze never wavered. "What are the terms?" Varnak's smile widened. 3 rounds. First round, basic target acquisition. Second, moving targets. Final round. He leaned closer, his breath cold against her skin. "A target through environmental interference. Something you humans struggle with, right? Or do you want to save yourself the embarrassment and bow out now?" Jessica stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. She was a full head shorter than Varnak, but there was an unmistakable steel in her eyes that made Vega step back. "I accept," she said. Varnak chuckled, glancing at his soldiers. "You hear that, boys? The human thinks she can keep up. This should be good. Better get your notepads ready. You might learn a thing or two about real marksmanship." Jessica watched them walk away, their laughter echoing through the chamber. Vega shook his head, muttering curses under his breath. "You don't have to do this, Jinx. Those Zarthans aren't just arrogant. They're lethal. Their scopes can cut through fog, radiation, even magnetic interference. And Varnak. Varnak's a blowhard," Jessica said, eyes following the retreating aliens. "But he's good. I can tell by the way he carries himself. Confident. Too confident." Vega ran a hand through his hair. "Look, Jinx, you're the best shot Earth's got. But this isn't Earth. This is their territory. Their tech. Their rules." Jessica's jaw tightened. "Yeah, and that's why they underestimate us. They think their fancy scopes and plasma pulses will do the work for them. But they've never met a human sniper." Vega's expression softened. "You sure about this?" Jessica smirked. I didn't come all the way to the Galactic station to be talked down to buy a bunch of walking blue light bulbs. Besides, I never back down from a challenge. The announcement came through the intercom, echoing across the vast chamber. Contestants, report to the target range. Round 1 begins in 5 minutes. Vega squeezed her shoulder. Be careful out there. Always am, Jessica said, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. The target range was a cavernous expanse, its walls lined with digital displays and holographic emitters. The crowd had already gathered, their alien eyes glowing with anticipation. Jessica stepped onto the platform, feeling the weight of every gaze on her. Across the range, Varnak lounged against a console, his plasma rifle gleaming. His soldiers clustered around him, laughing, slapping his back, already celebrating a victory that hadn't yet been won. Jessica took a deep breath, centering herself. Focus. Breathe. Adjust. Her father's old sniper mantra echoed in her mind, grounding her. A Zarthan official stepped forward, his voice amplified by unseen speakers. First round. Stationary targets. 3 shots each. Highest accuracy wins. Contestants, prepare to fire. Varnak stepped forward, raising his plasma rifle. Its barrel glowed with a soft, ominous blue light. He fired 3 times in rapid succession. Each shot struck dead center, the holographic targets disintegrating in a flash of blue plasma. The crowd erupted in cheers. Varnak turned to Jessica, smirk firmly in place. Your turn, Sergeant. Jessica stepped up, feeling the cold metal of her rifle against her cheek. She inhaled deeply, exhaled slowly, and pulled the trigger. The recoil was familiar, the report echoing through the range. 1, 2, 3. Each bullet punched through the holographic targets, dead center. The crowd's reaction was quieter this time, more surprised than impressed. Varnak's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Second round, the official announced. Moving targets. 3 shots each. Varnak raised his rifle, his expression now one of grim concentration. This time, the targets zipped across the range, darting in unpredictable patterns. Varnak's plasma rifle hummed, each shot landing with unerring precision. Cheers echoed once more. Varnak lowered his rifle, his eyes fixed on Jessica, daring her to match him. Jessica stepped up, feeling the weight of the stairs, the scrutiny pressing down like a physical force. She calmed her breathing, focusing solely on the moving targets. One by one, they darted across the range, and one by one, they fell under her crosshairs. Each shot landed with deadly accuracy, and when the final target shattered, the room fell silent. Varnak's smirk had vanished. His blue eyes burned with frustration. Jessica reloaded her rifle, her expression calm, but her pulse quickened. Final round, the official said, voice tense. Environmental interference. Extreme range. The air shimmered as the holographic range morphed, fog and digital rain obscuring the targets. The crowd leaned forward, anticipation thick in the air. Varnak's hands tightened on his rifle. You ready to give up, human? Jessica met his glare, her gaze steady and unyielding. Not a chance. Varnak raised his rifle, his jaw clenched. Jessica watched him through narrowed eyes, her mind already calculating distances, wind speed, and bullet drop. The real contest was just beginning. The holographic range morphed into a dense, fog-laden battlefield, a maze of shifting obstacles and simulated environmental interference. The air crackled with electric tension, the crowd's murmurs swelling to a dull roar as Varnak stepped forward. His plasma rifle gleamed under the synthetic lights, the barrel still warm from the last round. Jessica stood a few paces behind, her rifle cradled against her chest. Her eyes tracked the digital rain cascading from the ceiling, droplets refracting light like tiny prisms. The interference was deliberate, designed to scatter and distort the target's image, making precise shots nearly impossible. For any ordinary shooter. Varnak exhaled, his nostrils flaring. You ready for the big leagues, human? Or would you like to save face and bow out now? Jessica's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. She kept her gaze forward, eyes locked onto the far end of the range where the targets waited, flickering, ghostly shapes barely visible through the fog and rain. The Zarthan official raised a clawed hand, his holographic display pulsing. Final round. 2 targets. Extreme range. Environmental interference. Accuracy and timing will determine the victor. Contestants, on my mark. Jessica adjusted her stance, steadying her breathing. This was the moment that would decide everything. She felt the weight of every stare, every skeptical gaze from the crowd. But her mind was already in that quiet, focused place, where nothing existed but her rifle and the targets. Begin. Varnak moved first. He stepped forward, plasma rifle rising in a fluid, practiced motion. The weapon hummed, the barrel adjusting automatically to the shifting fog and electromagnetic interference. The Zarthan plasma rifle was a marvel of advanced technology, compensating for wind and rain, amplifying thermal signatures to pinpoint targets. Varnak's fingers squeezed the trigger, and a burst of blue plasma shot across the range, slicing through the fog like a comet. The first target disintegrated, pixelated fragments cascading to the ground. The crowd erupted in applause, and Varnak's soldiers hooped and hollered, their cheers echoing off the metallic walls. Varnak flashed a grin at Jessica. 1 down. Your turn, Sergeant. Jessica stepped forward, her boots crunching against the wet floor. The air was heavy with anticipation, every eye fixed on her as she lifted her rifle. Unlike Varnak's plasma weapon, her sniper rifle was old school, coil-loaded, bolt-action, no automated targeting system. Just metal, muscle, and instinct. She exhaled, the world narrowing to a single point. The target flickered in the fog, a faint outline half hidden behind a simulated tree. Jessica adjusted for wind drift, accounting for the rain's refractive index and the gravitational pull of the space station's artificial field. Her breathing slowed. Her pulse steadied. Her fingers squeezed the trigger, and the rifle roared. The bullet spiraled through the air, slicing through the rain and fog, and struck the target dead center. The hologram shattered into digital shards, the sound reverberating through the range. The crowd fell silent. Even Varnak's soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Jessica lowered her rifle, her expression calm, betraying nothing. Varnak's grin faltered, but he masked it quickly. Not bad, he said, his tone forced. But the final target is different. This one moves. Jessica said nothing. Her eyes locked on the far end of the range. The Zarthan official raised his hand once more, his glowing eyes fixed on both contestants. Final target. Unpredictable trajectory. Simulated magnetic interference. The fog thickened, darkening to a murky gray. Holographic lightning arced through the air, flashing and crackling. The rain intensified, hammering down with relentless force. Somewhere deep in the fog, the target flickered, moving, zigzagging through the storm like a ghost. Varnak adjusted his rifle, activating a secondary scope. The targeting interface flickered to life, highlighting heat signatures and electromagnetic pulses. He smirked, raising the weapon to his shoulder. "Watch and learn, human," he said, voice low. The plasma rifle whined, its barrel glowing a fierce, electric blue. Varnak tracked the target's unpredictable movements, his eyes narrowed in concentration. The trigger squeezed. The plasma bolt shot forward, tearing through the fog in a dazzling arc. The target shimmered, darting left at the last second. The plasma bolt missed, searing through empty air. Varnak's jaw clenched, eyes flashing. The crowd murmured, the Zarthan soldiers shifting uncomfortably. Varnak reset his stance, fingers tightening around the grip. The target shifted again, accelerating, twisting through the fog. Varnak recalibrated, the rifle's AI struggling to lock onto the erratic movements. He fired again. The plasma bolt veered off course, missing by a fraction. The target continued its dance, untouched. Varnak cursed under his breath, lowering the rifle. Sweat beaded along his brow, and his soldiers watched in stunned silence. For a long moment, only the sound of rain and the hiss of holographic lightning filled the air. Jessica stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate. The target was still out there, weaving through the fog, a barely perceptible shadow in the storm. She knelt, bracing her rifle against her knee, her posture controlled and steady. She closed her eyes for a brief second, inhaling deeply. She felt the pulse of the station's artificial gravity, the subtle vibration of the floor beneath her boots. She listened to the rhythm of the rain, the cadence of the storm. Then she opened her eyes, locking onto the target. Her mind processed everything in an instant. The erratic movements, the magnetic interference, the lightning bursts that momentarily illuminated the shadow. She adjusted for the wind drift, recalibrated for distance, and angled the barrel slightly to the left. Time seemed to stretch as her fingers squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, the muzzle flashed blinding against the fog. The bullet spiraled forward, slicing through the rain like a hawk through a storm. The target flickered, dodging right. But Jessica had anticipated it. The bullet ricocheted off a metal post, altering trajectory, and struck the target dead center. The hologram shattered, the fragments raining down like silver dust. For a moment, there was nothing but stunned silence. Then the crowd erupted in a roar, a chaotic mix of cheers, gasps, and disbelieving murmurs. Even the Zarthan soldiers looked at each other, their smug expressions wiped clean. Varnak's face was a mask of disbelief, his jaw clenched so tight that his jawline twitched. Jessica rose, slinging the rifle over her shoulder, her eyes never leaving his. "You were saying something about learning," she said calmly. "Maybe I missed it." Varnak's fists tightened, his eyes burning with unmasked fury. For a moment, it looked as though he might lunge at her, but he stopped himself, breathing heavily. His gaze darkened, his expression a mix of hatred and something else. Respect. Jessica turned away, her boots echoing against the floor as she strode toward the exit. The crowd parted for her, whispers trailing in her wake. Vega met her halfway, eyes wide, a grin splitting his face. "Jinx," he said, shaking his head. "You just—" "Not here," she said, her voice low. "Not yet." Vega's expression sobered as he fell into step beside her. "Varnak won't let this go. You embarrassed him in front of everyone. He's not the type to take that lying down." Jessica's eyes were cold, distant. "I know." She glanced over her shoulder, her gaze locking with Varnak's. His eyes were narrowed slits of blue fire. His jaw clenched so hard she could hear the faint grinding of his teeth. Whatever he was planning, it was far from over. The simulated battlefield stretched before Jessica like a dark, alien jungle, a labyrinth of towering trees, dense undergrowth, and shifting terrain. The sky above was an artificial black, streaked with flashes of lightning that illuminated the battlefield in staccato bursts. Synthetic rain poured down, mingling with a metallic scent of ozone. Jessica knelt in the underbrush, her breathing slow and controlled. The rain plastered her dark hair to her scalp, and droplets slid down her face, but her eyes remained steady, sweeping the terrain. Somewhere out there, Varnak was hunting her. And he would not be alone. "Remember," the Zarthan official's voice echoed through her earpiece, a metallic undertone to his words. "This is a live combat simulation. No lethal rounds, but all injuries will register as real. First to incapacitate the opponent wins." Jessica flexed her fingers around her rifle's grip, feeling the familiar weight, the cool steel pressing against her palms. The rain hammered down, turning the forest floor into a thick, sticky sludge. She would have to move carefully. Every step could leave a trail. Every breath could give her away. She inhaled deeply, closing her eyes for a brief second. The sense of damp earth and artificial vegetation filled her lungs. She needed to listen, to focus. Varnak was a sniper, but he was also arrogant. He would come at her directly, confident that his superior tech and thermal scopes would find her first. That was his mistake. A rustling to her left. Jessica snapped her eyes open, rifle raised, breath held. A flicker of movement. A sleek, robotic drone hovered just above the underbrush, its sensors pulsing with blue light. One of Varnak's scouts. Jessica adjusted her aim, aligning her scope. The drone hovered, scanning the area, a faint hum emanating from its propulsion system. She held her breath, waiting for the perfect moment. The crosshairs settled on the drone's sensor array. One shot, a soft pop, and the drone dropped to the ground, sparks crackling from its chassis. Jessica didn't linger. She moved swiftly, melting into the shadows, her steps light and controlled. Varnak would have seen the feed cut. He would know she was close. She slid down a shallow incline, the mud slick beneath her boots. Ahead, the jungle thickened, the canopy overhead forming a tangled web of branches and leaves. Visibility dropped to near zero, the rain blurring everything into a shifting, liquid haze. Perfect. Jessica crouched behind a fallen log, her breathing shallow. She scanned the area, her gaze flicking from shadow to shadow. No sign of Varnak yet, but he was out there, watching, waiting. A branch snapped behind her, loud as a gunshot in the silence. Jessica spun around, rifle raised, eyes sharp. Another drone, this one larger, more advanced. It hovered at head level, its sensors swiveling toward her. Jessica fired. The bullet punched through its control module, sending the drone crashing into a nearby tree. But in that split second, a plasma shot rang out, the blue bolt sizzling through the air, narrowly missing her shoulder. Varnak. Jessica dove to the ground, rolling behind a boulder as another plasma bolt scorched the air where her head had been. The rock sizzled, the surface blackened from the impact. Nice try, human. Varnak's voice echoed through the jungle, taunting, reverberating. You're quick, I'll give you that. But you can't outrun me. Not here. Jessica's jaw clenched. Varnak was trying to rattle her, to make her second-guess herself. But she knew better than to play his game. She pressed her back against the rock, listening. The rain masked most sounds, but there, soft footsteps, circling to her left. Varnak was closing in. Jessica pressed a button on her wrist console. The drone she'd downed earlier still had power. With a quick recalibration, she set it to emit a faint heat signature, a decoy. Then she tossed a small rock to her right, letting it clatter against a metal structure. A beat of silence. Then, Varnak's plasma rifle hissed, a blue bolt slamming into the decoy's location. Jessica moved, slipping through the underbrush, her body low and silent. Varnak's footsteps pounded through the mud, growing louder, closer. She caught sight of him then, a towering silhouette framed by a flash of lightning. His rifle glowed with residual plasma, the barrel still hot. Varnak scanned the area, his luminous blue eyes narrowed, sweeping over the decoy. Jessica exhaled, aligning her scope. She could take the shot now, end it. But something felt wrong. Varnak was too exposed, too obvious. This was a setup. A soft whirring to her right. Jessica jerked her head just in time to see a third drone, its targeting lasers locking onto her. Varnak's trap. She rolled to the side, plasma bolts scorching the ground where she'd been crouching. The drone whirred, tracking her, but she was already moving, weaving through the trees, mud splattering against her legs. You're predictable, human. Varnak's voice echoed through the jungle, laced with smug satisfaction. You might be fast, but you're not smart enough to outthink me. Jessica gritted her teeth, sliding into a shallow trench. The rainwater pooled around her knees, but she ignored it. Varnak was baiting her, trying to flush her out, force her into the open. Fine. She could use that. Jessica pulled a grenade from her belt, an EMP pulse, powerful enough to knock out Varnak's drones but not strong enough to affect the simulation's mainframe. She twisted the cap, setting the timer, and hurled it high into the air. The grenade burst mid-flight, a pulse of blue light rippling outward. Varnak's drones dropped from the sky, their systems fried, their sensors flickering. For a brief moment, the battlefield fell silent. Jessica moved then, sprinting low and fast, her rifle at the ready. Varnak cursed, his plasma rifle whining as it recalibrated. But he was too slow. She spotted him crouched behind a tree, his back turned to her as he struggled to reboot his weapon. Jessica raised her rifle, finger hovering over the trigger. One shot would end it. One shot would prove everything. But just as she lined up the crosshairs, Varnak turned, his eyes blazing. He moved faster than she expected, hurling a smoke grenade at her feet. It detonated in a burst of thick, choking vapor, obscuring her vision. Jessica coughed, eyes stinging, her grip tightening around her rifle. Shadows moved in the smoke, indistinct, darting left and right. Varnak's voice echoed, taunting, circling her like a predator. "Nice try, Sergeant," he said, his tone dark, dangerous. "But you're out of your league now." Jessica forced herself to calm down, to focus. She closed her eyes, blocking out the smoke, the rain, the echoes of Varnak's voice. Listen. A footstep, soft, to her right. Another to her left. Varnak was circling, trying to disorient her. But his mistake was assuming she needed her eyes to find him. Jessica shifted her weight, pivoting on her heel. She felt the mud give slightly under her boot. That was it, the direction of the echo, the vibration through the ground. Varnak was behind her. She dropped to one knee, swinging her rifle up as Varnak lunged through the smoke. His plasma rifle glowed, a burst of blue light streaking toward her. Jessica twisted, the bolt grazing her arm, searing through fabric and flesh. Pain shot up her shoulder, but she didn't flinch. Her fingers squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck Varnak in the thigh, a perfect, clean shot. He dropped to one knee, a grunt of pain escaping his lips. His plasma rifle fell from his grasp, landing in the mud with a soft splash. Jessica rose, breathing hard, her arm throbbing. Varnak glared up at her, his eyes burning, his jaw clenched so tightly that the veins in his neck stood out like cords. "Looks like you missed," she said, her voice calm, unyielding. Varnak's gaze darkened, his fists clenching in the mud. But he said nothing. The simulation flickered, the jungle dissolving into pixels as the battlefield reset, the rain fading away, the trees vanishing. The crowd reappeared around them, their faces a mixture of shock and awe. Varnak staggered to his feet, chest heaving, eyes still locked on Jessica. She met his glare with cold, unwavering eyes. Whatever came next, she was ready. The training chamber dissipated into a haze of pixelated fragments, the simulated jungle fading to reveal the cold, metallic interior of the galactic combat arena. The crowd's murmurs echoed against the steel walls, a rising tide of disbelief and awe. Varnak stood at the center, mud-splattered and seething, his chest heaving with each ragged breath. His plasma rifle lay at his feet, half buried in the muck. Jessica remained a few paces away, her rifle slung over her shoulder. Blood seeped from the burn along her arm, staining the sleeve of her fatigues, but she kept her posture straight, her expression calm. Despite the pain radiating through her shoulder, her eyes never left Varnak's face. The Zarthan commander, a massive figure with crystalline skin that shimmered like a black opal, stepped forward. His cold, luminous eyes moved between them, lingering on Varnak's hunched form. The crowd fell silent. Even Varnak's soldiers, who had been cheering moments ago, now watched in stunned silence. The commander's jaw clenched, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "Captain Varnak, you were defeated in single combat by a human. What do you have to say for yourself?" Varnak's fists tightened, his knuckles white. His jaw twitched, but he said nothing. The air between him and Jessica crackled with unspoken rage. Jessica remained silent, her gaze unyielding. The commander turned, his eyes landing on Jessica. "Sergeant Monroe, you have proven yourself a formidable combatant. Your tactics were unexpected." Jessica inclined her head. "Thank you, Commander." Before the commander could respond, Varnak let out a low, bitter laugh. "Unexpected? She got lucky. A fluke shot in a simulated battlefield doesn't make her superior. It doesn't make humans superior." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jessica's expression remained calm, but her eyes narrowed, a flash of steel beneath her composure. Vega stepped forward, fists clenched. "Watch your mouth, Varnak. You lost. Fair and square." Varnak's eyes snapped to Vega, his lip curling. "Fair? There was nothing fair about that. She used primitive tricks and cheap tactics. That's not skill. That's desperation." Jessica stepped forward, closing the distance between them. The crowd hushed, leaning in, waiting for the confrontation. "You call it desperation," she said, her voice low, controlled. "I call it adaptation. You relied on your tech. I relied on my instincts. And that's why you lost. Varnak's jaw clenched, his breath coming in sharp, angry bursts. His blue eyes blazed with barely restrained fury. You got one lucky shot. That's all it was. Jessica tilted her head, her gaze unwavering. If that's what helps you sleep at night, sure. The commander stepped between them, his expression hardening. Enough. Varnak, your behavior is unbecoming of a Zarthan officer. Accept your loss with dignity or forfeit your rank. Varnak's face twisted, but he bit back whatever retort hovered on his tongue. His gaze dropped to the floor, fists still clenched at his sides. Jessica exhaled, the tension easing from her shoulders. The ache in her arm flared, a dull, throbbing pain that made her fingers tingle. Vega stepped closer, his eyes sweeping over her injury. You need a medic, he said, his voice tight with concern. I'll live, Jessica said, but the adrenaline was wearing off, and the pain was becoming harder to ignore. The commander's gaze shifted to Jessica, his crystalline skin catching the light. Sergeant Monroe, you have shown exceptional skill and resourcefulness. The Zarthan High Command will be notified of your performance. Perhaps there is more to human combatants than we initially perceived. Jessica nodded. Thank you, sir. Before the commander could respond, another figure pushed through the crowd. A Zarthan sniper, younger than Varnak, his luminous eyes filled with uncertainty. He stepped forward, his rifle slung across his back, and extended a hand toward Jessica. You were impressive, he said, his voice stiff but sincere. I've never seen anyone shoot like that. Not without a plasma scope. Jessica eyed him, then took the offered hand, her grip firm. Thanks. Name's Jessica. The sniper swallowed, glancing at Varnak, who still stood rigid, eyes blazing with silent fury. Karev, he said. I wouldn't mind learning some of those techniques. If you're willing to teach. Jessica released his hand, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. Maybe. If you can keep up. Karev nodded, stepping back, his expression thoughtful. The crowd began to disperse, soldiers from various species muttering to one another, casting Jessica furtive, curious glances. Vega touched Jessica's uninjured arm. Let's get that burn checked out. You've proven your point. No need to bleed out for it. Jessica nodded, exhaustion seeping into her bones. The adrenaline rush had faded, leaving behind a dull ache that radiated through her shoulder and down her spine. But as she turned to leave, a cold, familiar voice echoed behind her. Sergeant Monroe. Jessica stopped, her back stiffening. Varnak stood a few paces away, his eyes dark, face shadowed. The crowd had thinned, but a few stragglers lingered, watching the two of them. Vega tensed beside her, his muscles coiled like a spring. Varnak stepped closer, his boots squelching against the wet floor. This isn't over, he said, his voice low, just for her ears. You humiliated me. In front of everyone. Jessica met his gaze, her expression cold. You did that to yourself. Varnak's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. You got one shot off. That doesn't make you better than me. Jessica's lips curled into a thin, humorless smile. No. It just makes me smarter. Varnak's fists tightened, and for a moment, Jessica thought he might swing at her. But then the commander's voice echoed through the chamber, calling for Varnak. With one last glare, Varnak turned and stalked away, his shoulders rigid, his fists still clenched at his sides. Vega released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That guy's going to be a problem. Jessica exhaled, the tension slowly unwinding from her body. I know. Vega eyed her, concern etched into the lines of his face. You handled him well. But Varnak's not the type to forget. Or forgive. Jessica nodded, her gaze fixed on Varnak's retreating back. Let him come. Next time, I won't be aiming for his leg. Vega shook his head, a half-smile playing on his lips. You're a piece of work, Jinx. Remind me not to get on your bad side. Jessica finally allowed herself a small, genuine smile. You're safe. For now. They turned toward the exit, the overhead lights casting long shadows behind them. Around them, the chatter of soldiers rose and fell, the echoes of the contest still fresh in the air. But beneath it all, a darker tension simmered, a storm waiting to break. Jessica flexed her injured arm, the burn still throbbing beneath the bandage. The pain was a reminder, a pulse that beat in time with her heart. Varnak would come for her again. Of that, she had no doubt. And next time, he wouldn't be playing by the rules.